Lesson 16 today. We're going to get into irrational numbers. We've already talked about rational numbers. Today it's irrational numbers. The prefix simply means not. So if a real number is not rational, then it is what type of number? If it is not rational, it would be irrational. So real numbers are either rational or they're irrational. Nothing else. They're one or the other. They have to be either rational or irrational. Remember, rational means they can be written as the quotient of two integers. They can be written as a fraction, basically. So let's use that definition of rational to identify which of these is irrational. Well, -3, I can write that as the quotient of two integers. I can write that -3 over 1. -3 is an integer, 1 is an integer. 9, well, the square root of 9, rather, is 3. And I can write that as a fraction, as the quotient of two integers. 3 is an integer and 1 is an integer. Well, 9 over 2 obviously can be written as the quotient of two integers. 9 and 2 are both integers, and it's a fraction. And the square root of 7 is where we run into some problems here. The square root of 7, if I use my calculator, and I'm assuming you know how to use the square root button. If not, see me in class tomorrow and I'll show you. Can be written something like that. There's no pattern here. There's no repeating numbers. So this cannot be written as a fraction. So it is irrational. So anything that does repeat, if we have a repeating decimal or a decimal that just stops, then that can be written as a fraction. Which of these numbers is between 2 and 3 on the number line? And I'm going to show you how I know. Okay, I'm going to make a number line, and I'm going to label 2 and 3 on it. But I'm going to do a little twist here. I'm going to rename 2 as the square root of 4, and I'm going to rename 3 as the square root of 9. The square root of 4 is 2, so they're both at the same spot on the number line. And the square root of 9 is 3. So both of those are at the same spot on the number line. So anything between 2 and 3 would have to be between the square root of 4 and the square root of 9. Square root of 2 is less than 2. The square root of 3 is also less than 2. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 5, yeah, that's between the square root of 4 and the square root of 9, making it between 2 and 3. Let's arrange these numbers in order from least to greatest. We've done this a lot. We're going to throw these square roots in here. That's the only one I'm looking up here that I'm a little confused about where it might fall in relationship to these other numbers. I know that it's less than 2, like we saw on the last screen. Well, guess what? It's also greater than 1. I did it by writing it as a decimal using my calculator, but you could also say 1 times 1 is 1, so the square root of 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 4, so the square root of 4 is 2. So the square root of 2 has got to be somewhere between 1 and 2. It is. Talk more about that later. So let's go here. We got the negative number, obviously our smallest. We got 0 is going to come up next. And then we've got decision making here. Which one's bigger, 3/4 or 0.5? 0.5 is smaller. Actually, that's the more important thing. 3/4 is 0.75, so that would be next. Then we've got 1, and then now we know that the square root of 2 is greater than 1. There's our answer. Notice when I'm writing these in order, I'm not writing any alternate form of them. I'm writing the original numbers they wanted me to order, okay? If you end up turning them all into decimals, don't write those decimals. Write the original numbers. Find the length of each side of these squares. Okay, this does heavily involve square roots because we know that the area of a square is its side length squared. So the square root of the area will give us the side length. Let's show you how that works. So all we have to do is take the square root of 400 millimeters squared, and that should give us the side length, 20 millimeters. Okay, and if we work it backwards and we plug the side length, 20 millimeters, into s squared, 20 millimeters times 20 millimeters would be 400 millimeters squared. Let's see if it works here again. All we have to do is take the square root of the area, and we've got our answer. Okay, now here's what's difficult is the square root of 3. The only way you can write the square root of 3 and keep it exact is the square root of 3. And the square root of centimeters squared is centimeters. So this is the actual length. That might not make much sense to you because it's an irrational number, and this is the only way we can write it. We don't have the ability to write it as an exact decimal or as a fraction. So maybe, you know, if we're talking to somebody, we'd say it's about 1.73 centimeters, but that's not exact. Square root of 3 centimeters is exact. 1.73 centimeters is an approximate. It's pretty darn close. Use a calculator to find the square roots of these numbers. Round to the nearest hundredth. On most calculators, you would type in 10 and then hit the square root button. On some calculators, you have to hit the square root button and then the 10. Either way, if you're doing it right, you should get 3.162, and then the numbers go on from there. We'll do more on rounding later, but the 2 tells me to keep the 6, and this is to the nearest hundredth. Square root of 20 is about 4.472. Goes on from there, so I'll round that to 4.47. Okay, and the square root of 40. Let's do some estimating here first. Square root of 40, well, 6 times 6 is 36. So I know it's more than 6. 7 times 7 is 49, so I know it's less than 7 because 40 is between 36 and 49. So it's between 6 and 7. Let's see if that works out right on the calculator. When I type it into the calculator, 6.324, I'm sorry, 6.324, which is about 6.32. All right, and lastly, let's refer to our answers in problems G, H, and I to answer this question. Which number is twice as much as the square root of 10? Square root of 20 or the square root of 40? Which one is twice as much as the square root of 10? Well, let's take a look at that last one. All right, so square root of 10 was 3.16. Which is twice as much? Square root of 20 or square root of 40? Well, twice as much as 3 is 6. So twice as much as the square root of 10 has got to be the square root of 40. That's it. Okay, so some might mistakenly think that because 10 times 2 is 20, that the square root of 10 times 2 is the square root of 20, but they would be incorrect. Okay, the square root of 10 times 2 is the square root of 40. We'll get more into why that is at a later date as well. Okay, that's all I've got for you today. Come in tomorrow, and obviously we'll do some more practice. See you then.